mom, Barb Rice, and I'm Sydney Freiberg. Today we're going to be covering all the questions that we have as moms from chapter 15, which is going to be about when, the why, and the how of disciplining. So now that we know all of the facts, I'm sure, like myself, you guys are like, what? Okay, there's a couple things. Hold on, I have questions. So here today we're going to talk about 5 questions that came to mind for me after learning all of this information, and then we'll cover some more later. So the first question we have is, when is my child old enough to discipline? Because my Kingston is 8 months, and there's some will there. So what do we do? Because I saw the will, I mean, we both saw it at like 4 months.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Well, I think, again, it just comes back down to, you know, God has a will and He has a way. And I love this question because I think a lot of us know when we start running into our kids' will, it's really just a matter of, are we willing to walk in obedience to what God has told us? You know, I mean, when they're little kids have little problems, big kids have big problems. So when they're little, you want to address it in a more gentle way because they're very sensitive.
Right.
So it's not going to take a lot.
Yeah.
Well, at least most of them are sensitive. Not all of them.
Right.
Some of mine were not sensitive at all.
Yeah.
And so it took a little bit more, should I say, a little bit more flick in the wrist to get their attention and be like, oh, she was not playing. She's serious,
right.
You know?
Yes.
And so, so anyway, you know, I always feel like you first start to see their will when you're changing their diaper.
Yes.
You know, and I think that's kind of what we're seeing with Kingston is, you know, he's so cute. And I know your baby. I know your babies are so cute.
Right.
I've had lots of them, so I get it. But this is the beginning of your parenting journey, not just feeding them and providing for them and housing them, okay? Yeah. But training them in the way that they should go. And so, you know, I always say, start to, you know, I'm a realist. Right. I see the reality of, yes, at around 6 months, they really start to show their will. And, you know, it comes with them not wanting to stay on the changing table. And so here's the thing, you guys. It's like, you know, you don't have to discipline them. You can let them flip off the table.
Right.
But they're going to hurt themselves.
Yeah.
And so the whole point of God telling us, you know, even when He gave us the commandments, when He was like, don't do this, don't do that, what He's really saying is don't hurt yourself. And what we're training our kids is, hey, you're going to hurt yourself if you don't listen. Yeah. And so, unfortunately, some of us, most of us, only learn through pain. You know, we don't want it to be catastrophic by them flipping off a table. Right. You know, so we want to be able to use what God has told us to do in administering discipline, proper discipline, you know, not in anger on the first time, you know, to help them realize, oh, I need to listen to my father and my mother. Right. So even as early as 6 months, we can have those little teaching moments. Those teaching moments. But then what about how old is too old? Like, how do we know? How do we shift that from like an actual physical discipline to consequences? Like, how did you do that bridging that? Right. So, and I will, you know, I'll just say, you know, I have in my house, well, not all in my house, but out of my 5 biological kids, 4 of them are adults. Okay. I have 1 teenager left. And I will tell you that they're not perfect, but they're pretty fantastic. Right. Okay. And one of the things, and I kind of went on this on a semi-solo journey because a lot of my friends stopped disciplining early. Would you say like elementary school? Elementary, middle school for sure. Like what would they say? They would just try to do all these other type of
Right.
gymnastics.
Well, they would be like, it's just not working anymore, right?
Well, they would say it wasn't working
Right.
anymore, or they would say, oh, I just don't feel comfortable doing that anymore.
Right.
So they did all these other gymnastics, and it really allowed their kids to come off the rails.
Right.
Because the authority wasn't there anymore. They didn't transition to influence well. There's a lot of steps that we talked about early on in our conversation that didn't happen. And one of the things that a lot of people remove too early is the rod. So, but there's a way to use it. If this is the first time you're talking, like listening to us, there's like a whole, 10 podcasts ahead of this one that talks about why you do it and how you do it.
Totally.
And, how you do it God's way. So, yeah. So anyway, that I would say that most people stop using
it too early.
Yeah. And then try all these other methods that aren't really what God says to do, and then get bad results. Okay. So for us, I just really sought the Lord and was like, Lord, I'm going to hold you to do what you've told me to do, and I'm going to trust you with the results. And I'm telling you, God did. He did his thing in each one of my kids' hearts, and it was beautiful. But I will tell you, some of the kids were in their middle to upper teens, and it wasn't even so much that they were being disciplined in that manner, but it was more of the act of they knew the expectation, they knew the consequences, and what it does is because it's been such a habit and part of our family and the lifestyle of, listening and obeying, and that it really was an act of humility for both us and our kids to come back together and be reconciled and restored. Yeah. So I feel like that was a big part of it because all of our relationships are super good, even as young adults. Yeah.
Yeah, so now we know when to start, how it transitions, but talk about timeout, because that's very prevalent. I remember my friends when I was growing up getting timeouts. I feel like that was the thing. Now I don't even know if timeout is a thing anymore. It's more quiet time or whatever it's turned into.
Right.
But why do we not do timeout? What is the reasoning of just disciplining? There's not really any other additions to it,
Yeah. I mean, that was a big thing when I was raising you guys, is that was pretty new on the scene. I feel like when I was growing up, they called it grounding. When you were in middle school and high school, that you would get grounded. Yeah. So it was this condemnation. Right. And this shame over you.
That lasted
for weeks.
Yes.
So it was just like, there was just never, it just felt like a condemning punishment. Right. So, I feel like for your dad and I, one of the reasons why we didn't choose to do per se the timeout that most people do when they send their kid away, was because we could see that it really wasn't beneficial. Right. For the child or for the middle schooler or for the high schooler. I mean,
because they're not going and thinking about what
they did. The maturity level, I mean, just isn't there.
No.
I mean, sometimes as adults we struggle with that. So it's kind of like, how do I expect my kid to understand why I'm so mad and then think that they're going to go in their room and process correctly by themselves? Right. Like that's what you're here for. Especially when they're little. It's kind of like, okay, well now I'm just sitting here and now, look at the plate. Look at that. Like they're not having this ethereal, introspective, oh, woe is me, I've sinned moment. Okay, so I feel like, honestly, I just don't feel like it's biblical. I feel like God's given us a better way
totally
to address it. Right. That you, and then you're training in the midst of it too. So there's always the gospel in the midst of discipline. So it's not just the discipline part, but there's lots of conversation afterwards. They understand what the offense was. They understand what it means to be forgiven.
Yeah.
You know, they understand what it means to not have any shame, to be, you know, truly restored back to the relationship with their parent or sibling. I mean, there's just so much to it that God has given us. It's such a great gift that there really is no, I mean, I will say this, that if anybody needs a timeout, I feel like as parents do.
We need to cool down.
We need a time to calm down. So I feel like the world was tracking in the wrong direction.
Right.
So it's like, if we're going to do a timeout, you know, what we typically did is we would send you guys sort of to the place where you knew we were going to have the talk.
Right, the stairs.
The stairs. Or like someplace private. So like the stairs were not where everybody could see you.
Everyone.
Yeah, so the stairs were private, or like the guest bedroom downstairs, or my bedroom upstairs, you know, the master bedroom. So it was like a private conversation that we were having. So the funnier thing was, though, is that when I had a bunch of you guys, and I mean, I had 4 kids in 4.5 years. Yeah. In my 30s. So I mean, I was a little, you know, Looney Tune in the brain.
We were wild.
So anyway, yeah, you guys are wild. So anyway, we would like, something would happen, and then I would send somebody to go to where they were going to get disciplined, and then like I would cool down, and then I would like do one more thing, and then I would literally like forget the child was in there, and then you'd be in there going, "Mama, are you going to discipline me? Mama!"
Oh yeah, I need to do that.
Hold on, everybody, I gotta go.
Right.
That's spank your sisters.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome. Okay. So transitioning into out of timeout, kind of into a thought process of, and we all get this question, is, oh, well, I didn't hear you. Like we said, like, can you take out the trash? 30, 40 minutes later, an hour later, you look, the trash isn't taken out, and you're like, hey, so-and-so, why didn't you take out the trash? And they're like, oh, I didn't hear you. I'm like, so what do we do? You know? Like, is it like discipline? Is it, what do we do?
Well, that typically starts when they're young.
Right.
And, you know, I mean, there are times, you know, that I block everybody out. I mean, sometimes my kids will say, they'll be like, mother, mama, mom, Barb. And I'm like, oh. Yes?
Yeah.
And so it's okay. I mean, the first time.
Right.
You know, but when they're young, or even if they're in middle school or high school, it doesn't matter. Like, you just have to train them to hear your voice. And hopefully it's not your yelling voice. The only reason why I know that is because it takes one to know one, because I used to do that.
Totally.
And, you know, there are going to be times where, you know, you lose your stuff. And so I have tried through the years, especially when you guys were younger, to make sure that when they didn't hear me, you know, that I would come up in their face and train them, again, in times of non-conflict.
Right.
When you're not in the middle of something, you know, to where you have to yell, but where, you know, just in everyday life, you know, when you say their name, you know, even if it's a gentle tone of saying their name, you know, everybody is going to connect when you say their name. And, you know, it was interesting. I think I gave this example before, but when my boys were little, when they were like, you know, 5 and under, you know, they were like, bang, 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 throw. And I'd be like, you know, Isaac. And then I'd be like, Isaac! Like, you know, and I'm like, Lord, I literally was trying to read my Bible, and I remember reading my Bible, and the Lord's like, let me teach you how to do this correctly, honey. Like, first of all, stop yelling.
Right.
And I'm like, oh,
yeah.
okay.
Right.
And he's like, have him come up to you, you know, and have him put his little hands on your face. And I was like, okay. And I was like, Isaac, come here. And then he walked over to me, and I said, put your hands on my face. And he put his hands on my face. And then I said, okay, look in my eyes. And the funniest thing was, like, he was like this. I'm like, buddy, look in my eyes. And he was like, and I'm like,
So
and I
cute.
just, it was the cutest
So
thing ever. It was so
cute,
cute.
yeah.
And God's like, yes, have him look in your eyes. And he goes, and then just speak gently to him. And so I was like, he had his hands on my face and looked in my eyes, and I was like, stop throwing things. And he was like,
Okay.
yes, Mama.
Yeah,
You know, and then he just like, blah, and just, you know, but it was one
so
of those things. And
sweet.
then God reminded me, he said, you know, it's the same thing like when I talk to you. You know, I'm not yelling at you.
Right.
Okay, I want you to put your hands on my word. So I'm holding the word. He's like, and look into my word, look into my eyes, and I'm looking into the word. And he's like, and let me correct and redirect you gently.
Yes.
And so,
That's so good.
yeah, so I felt like, you know, just like I need to learn how to hear God speak to me, my kids need to learn how to hear me speak to them.
Totally. Yeah.
And so you train them to listen to your voice so that there isn't an excuse, oh, I didn't hear you. Because really, you know, two things are happening in that is disrespect. Because they're not listening to you.
Right.
You know, it's the same thing with God. God's like, that's disrespectful when you don't listen to me. And secondly, it's my fault that I didn't train them to listen to me. Okay.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
good.
yeah.
So wrapping all of this up, kind of putting the bow on top, I've heard my friends with multiple kids say this. I've heard you say this. I'm like, I'm already on the cusp of, Lord willing, as I have more children and just thinking about, oh my goodness, what do we do when we feel like we're disciplining all the time? Like, are we disciplining too much? Like, should we feel discouraged? Like, I'm sure moms are out there just like, I am never not disciplining. Someone is always doing something wrong. Like, especially in the young years, there's a lot of training.
Yes.
So what would you say to that, Mom?
Yes. Well, I would first of all say to you, Mama, you are doing a great job. Okay, that's the first thing.
Yeah.
But I will say it is the hardest job ever. It's the best job, and it's the hardest job.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the training, I feel like, is on the moms. Okay. Yes, the dads are training also, but a lot of times, you know, the dads have other responsibilities or work. So anyway, but I would say two things. The first one is that God is so merciful, and I just remember being exhausted with all, especially when you guys were all little. I mean, not that you get any less exhausted, but you really don't.
You're never not tired.
No, I will sleep when I'm dead.
Right.
Okay. So anyway, all that to say is that God is so merciful in the way that he has the rhythm. I felt like for our family, at least, that it was usually like 2 days on, like hardcore on, that like, you know, I was making sure people's hearts were in the right places. There was lots of disciplining with a couple at a time.
Right.
You know, there's kids arguing. I mean, I know your kids are going to fight with each other.
Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes they're going to do it in public and it's like super embarrassing.
Right.
But I'm telling you, be consistent with your discipline because you will reap a harvest of righteousness later. And especially if you can teach your kids how to resolve conflict together. So that's a whole nother thing we're going to do later.
Yeah.
But yes, that God had the rhythm of usually 2 days on and then like 2 or 3 days where like everyone was listening and like we were like, oh my gosh, this is great.
Yeah.
Like everyone's obeying, this actually worked. And then it'd be like, no, we're back at it. Like, 2-3 days in a row of absolute chaos and discipline. And then then God would give me like a couple of day break. I'd be like, oh,
wow.
I am a great parent.
Right.
And then it'd be like, yeah, no, we're broken again.
Yeah.
So, but
I love it.
yes,
Okay.
but that's kind of the rhythm.
Yes.
Is that usually a couple days on, and then God does give you like a weekend off.
Yeah. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it could be like, 2 days in the middle of the week.
Yes, I love it. Thanks for joining us today as we talked about frequently asked questions in parenting. Hope to see you next time here on